Yeah. All right. So calculus, chapter 1, anywhere you take calculus, whether that's here or in person or college or online or whatever, they're always going to start off with some kind of an algebra review. And so that's what our book does as well. It's usually about a chapter's worth of algebra review. Then there's a chapter's worth of a thing called limits, which we'll get to in chapter 2. And then they dig into some other topics beyond that. So today is the very beginnings of the algebra review. So what I'm asking you to do is tap into your algebra part of your brain, wherever you have algebra stored, and try to see if you can remember anything about the distance formula, slope, parallel lines, perpendicular lines, point slope equations or point slope form, slope intercept equations or slope intercept form. And I'll take any input I can get from anybody that you can fish out of your algebra part of your brain and write it on the board in any order that it occurs to you. And once we've gathered all of our facts, we'll try to tackle some homework-y looking kind of problems. So does anybody remember anything about any of that stuff? Yes, ma'am.
Y equals mx plus b.
What is that?
Slope. Point slope. Parallel. Slope intercept.
Slope intercept, good. So slope intercept form is y equals mx plus b. Anybody want to expound a little more detail on that? That is where we want to live for a minute. Anybody say anything more about that? Sure.
Wow.
Like the letters mean stuff. Yeah.
There's the y and the x.
There is. Yeah, we know the y and the x, absolutely. What x-axis, y-axis for sure. How about the m's and the b's?
One of them stands for slope.
One of them does stand for slope.
Isn't it m?
M is the slope.
Oh, we're killing it, Liz. Literally killing it.
And then the b is the y-intercept. Yeah, all you said was intercept, that was going to be in the right direction. There's a reason why it's called slope intercept, because there's a slope and an intercept.
Never thought about it that way.
This is specifically the y-intercept. Can anybody expound on what does it mean to be a y-intercept?
A point on the y thing.
It is. It is on the y.
Literally killing it.
What's it?
Axis.
Axis. If we dive into the world of ordered pairs, what will be true about the numbers here for something that's on the y-axis?
It'll be second.
0 for what?
For x.
Correct. So it would be 0, and then whatever number it happens to be. That topic I think I would now consider complete. And then we try to scan our memories for any of those other topics. The wisdom of the group, that came through.
Isn't distance time over?
That's okay. There is a distance thing about distances, rates, and times. That's true. This is a different kind of thing. There's like two distance formulas. One is more of like a
I'm thinking of physics.
more of a physicsy, yeah, kind of thing. We're looking for more of an algebra-y. That's the least likely one of all this stuff to be remembered, I think. You know the most about slope, I'll say that. You know more about slope than you think you do right now that you're giving credit for.
Do we really?
You know a lot of stuff about slope.
Oh.
Oh, y1 minus y2 over x1 minus x2.
I take that. There's other
Pretty sure you
forms.
can do it
Yep.
upside down, but
Yeah, we could. Okay, we could flop the order of those and we'd be fine. That's a slope thing. There's another way to express that same idea with a cooler algebra symbol.
yeah. Oh, x over
What's a
y.
delta?
Delta. What delta means
Change.
change in
Q.
y.
Y over change in x.
Sometimes there's a wordsy formula that we once upon a time memorized.
Rise over run.
Rise over run. What does the slope basically measure? One word synonym for slope. Another S word but longer.
Oh.
Oh my god.
Pick a letter.
Steepness.
Oh, you got it.
Really?
Wait, that was it?
Yeah.
Alright.
Right out of the gate, she didn't even need any letters. Boom.
We didn't have any more today.
Slope is just the steepness of a line. The steeper it is, the more the slope is. You've encountered different kinds of slope in your lifetime. There'd be like 4 main categories of slopiness.
Oh, like the up and the down.
So if I do that,
Positive.
that is positive.
Could it be negative?
Yeah, do an arm.
Like that. That.
From your point of view?
Negative.
Like that.
Yeah. Okay, so we can go like that. That's a negative slope.
No slope.
How's no slope go? Straight up and down has no slope.
No zero slope.
Zero slope will go horizontal line with a zero slope. And I think that closes off our slope facts. Parallel.
Lines that never touch.
They're lines that never touch, absolutely true. They don't have to both be like this, they could, however they go.
Yeah.
They would have something in common then. If they are going to stay parallel, they have to have
Same direction.
same. It'll be the word of the day, we've already used it.
Steep.
Slope.
Slope. Slope will be the word of the day, week, month, maybe not year, okay, but calculus is a lot about slopes at its heart. So slope is a humongous deal. Parallel lines have the same slope. How about perpendicular lines?
Right angle. Would you-
That's true, they make a right angle, that's all true. In terms of the word of the day, week and month, they are different, but they're different in a very special way. Anybody remember that? Slopes have to be negative, reciprocals.
Oh.
So for example, if one line was a slope of 2/3,
Have to be negative 3 times.
negative 3/2 is the partnership slope. Or if I said 6,
Negative.
negative 1/6 is its friend. Point slope? Point slope form is what you've always used to write equations. I would have to say, like, the slope of a line is 2/3. It goes through the point 5, 7. Write an equation for that line. It's called point slope because I give you a point, I give you the slope, you come up with an equation for the line. Does anybody remember that? I'll splotch on a set of parentheses to see if that helps anything.
Is it the AX one or no? That's it.
No. Splotch up minus.
Oh, y1, no, y2 minus x, y2 minus y1.
Something like that. Y minus, this would be the actual variable y, minus some kind of a y coordinate I give you. Some books will put this y with a 0 subscript. Some will do y with a 1 subscript, but they're going to do a y and put some sort of subscript on it to let you know this is actually the variable letter y. This is some kind of a y-based number.
X1 over there. So
Yeah, over here, we're going to go in x1 for some kind of an x coordinate. Yes?
is it B?
No.
A.
No.
Oh, like a 2/3 or 1 or some kind of.
Yeah, something like that representing the, yeah. Because again, the word of the day, week, month, and potentially
Slope.
year is slope. So there's slope intercept form, there's point slope form, perpendicular has to do with slopes, parallel has to do with slopes. Slope itself was steepness. The slope is in like 80% of the homework tonight in some way. Distance formula is just used to figure out how far apart things are. So this is the distance formula. Two. That is the distance formula. The distance formula is actually a familiar friend. If I wanted to know how far apart these points are, if you had a piece of graph paper or something like that, a lot of times the way you figure out how far apart points are is you'd measure this and you would know how much of an x change you got. You'd measure this and you would know how much of a y change you got. This would have to be a right angle. In a triangle like that, these two things are called the legs. You're trying to figure out the, no, different long word, similar kind of to that. Right triangles have two legs, and then the longest thing is the,
What's it start? Does it start with T?
no, starts with an H.
Hypotenuse.
Hypotenuse is correct. With what famous math tool, if you know the legs, can you figure out the hypotenuse?
Pythagorean theorem.
Pythagorean theorem is correct. How do you work it? What's the math steps? If you had to figure out the hypotenuse and you knew the legs, what do you do to the numbers from the legs? Square them, add them, and root them. And that's exactly what this formula is telling you to do. It's telling you subtract the x's so you know a leg, subtract the y's so you know the other leg, square them, add them, and root them, because that's essentially the distance formula is the Pythagorean theorem. We spent a lot of time with the Pythagorean theorem in trig, even more in geometry. Distance formula was in the geometry book and the Algebra 2 book, but it's easy to gloss over and forget that one, because essentially you're just using the Pythagorean theorem, which you didn't forget. So the distance formula, it's just the same thing. So I think that's the basic facts from which we try to do homework. Question about the basic facts setup. Let's look at page 9. So page 9, I have on my notes here, the homework that you're going to do is the odds. So all the odd answers are in the back. Tomorrow we don't need to go through any of the odd answers, just verify that you're doing them correctly in the back. I'm going to do a handful of evens to just give you a flavor for what you're doing. So on page 9, 1 to 6 says find the distances between the two given points. So with which tool from today are we doing that? The distance formula. So we'll start off with the distance formula. So if I go to do number 2, what would be the first mathy thing I would have to do?
You have to put the numbers in parentheses in the organizer. Subtract.
Subtract who and who?
2 and negative 1.
Subtract 2 and negative 1. So if you like steppy steps, I'd say subtract the x's, which is, what are we going to get if we subtract the 2 and the negative 1? 3. Or negative 3, it depends on your point of view in which order you subtracted them, and it doesn't really matter which order you choose to subtract them. We'll see why in a minute. While you're subtracting the x's, you might as well subtract the y's. So if we subtract the y's, we would turn out, what'd you say?
4.
A 4. or a negative 4, depending on your point of view. Doesn't really matter. Then what are we going to have to do to those numbers?
Square them.
Square them. So if you square them, you're thinking of
9.
and 16. Then you add them, and you're looking at 5. And then you have to root them, and the grand finale answer
5.
is 5. Why didn't it matter the order you subtracted? Why didn't the
Because
negatives
you
matter?
squared.
Because you squared later, and that's making everything positive. That's correct. You also could have shortcutted this if you're a super Pythagorean memory genius. You might remember we memorized certain triplets. 3, 4, 5 was a triplet. If you have legs of 3 and 4, 5's the hypotenuse. That stuff is still in there. Conceivably appearing in the homework, if you showed up something like the square root of 20. I'm going to do an empty space. Square root of 20 would not be the best possible answer for that setting. Can anybody give me a better answer? 2 root 5. You would search for a number like 4, because you can square root 4 to get the 2. And then that goes into it 5 times. We did that a lot in Traeger's. Does anybody need another memory reminder of sometimes the roots can be simplified? Okay, 7 to 10 is easier than 1 to 6. They're asking you on 7 to 10 to find the net changes, delta x and delta y. That's what we did right here. Okay, when we figured out the 3 and the 4, we figured out the changes. And then we had more math to do to get the distance. When we get to 7, 8, 9, 10, you just need the changes. So I don't think I even need to really do anything with that for you. You're just looking to do the subtractions to figure out the changes. So I'm going to take a pass on doing number 8, unless you're feeling like that's an emergency to do that. Anything on that? 11 through 14, they'll ask you to plot the points, and I don't care about that. You can do that if you wish, and I'll show you why you might choose that. But I don't care about that. And they ask you to find the slope of the line. So I'm going to say just do the slope of the line. So for number 12, we just need to do one of those slope formulas.
Does it matter which one?
It doesn't really matter which one, no.
Let's choose point slope.
No, I mean out of these.
Oh.
So we're just finding the slope, whichever way your imagination tends to gravitate. For 12, that's sort of a mean example. Let me switch examples off of 12 and do something with 4 different numbers. It makes it easier to talk. So like for number 12, everything's a 2. So I don't feel like doing that one. I won't do 12. I'll go 3, 4, -1, 5. So I go to do the slope. Who is affiliated with the top?
Y.
The y's, namely
3 negative.
y.
4 and 5.
4 and 5. So if some people want to do 4 minus 5, they can. If some people want to do 5 minus 4, they can. Pick one.
5 minus 4.
5 minus 4. Once you do 5 minus 4, you've established an order that now you have to obey. If we did 5 minus 4, now who's the other partnership?
-1 minus 2.
-1 minus 2. If you wanted to do 4 minus 5, you would have to then do
3 minus
minus -1. Make this one better, and we're going to have
1.
over
4
4, but the 4
is negative.
is negative, and it doesn't matter whether you write the negative on the top, the bottom, or in the front. It's just in there. If we had gone this direction, you'd have had a -1, positive 4, same thing. Here's why maybe you want to graph it, but maybe not. Where is 3, 4?
-3, not 4.
Where's negative 1, 5?
Back one. Okay.
If I play connect the dots, what type of slope is this from our visuals over there? It is negative slope, which we came up with. And is that very steep?
No.
No. So 1/4, it's not very steep. If it was a slope of like 8, that better be pretty steep. If it's a slope of 1, sort of like medium, but if you did a little sketch, it helps you confirm your thought, but you don't need to do the sketch to do the slope. Question on that? For 16, they ask you to find an equation for a vertical line, and I'm actually going to go back to our little notes area, and I am going to add on 2 facts. Can anybody remember if we have a vertical line, anything about the equation for that? Any vertical line has something in common about its equation. Any horizontal line had something in common about its equation, but they were different from each other. Is any of that ringing a bell for anybody?
And what about thing 0?
No? If it's x equals, and then they give you some kind of a number, that's guaranteed a vertical line. Like if I said to you, graph x equals 2, you'd go over 2 and be stuck there. So horizontal lines, y equals. Like if I said to you y equal 3, you'd have to go
Up 3.
up 3,
And be stuck
and then you're stuck there. So when we go to tackle 16, they say write down a vertical line. So when they say something about a vertical line, you go
Up and down.
writing an equation for a vertical line.
Oh,
Let's plot you the equals. What do we just decide about vertical line?
Negative 1.3.
Yeah, but what will we start with? We're going to use vertical line. We're to deal with vertical lines. Come over there. It is x equal. And then we would use square root of 2 because why did you pick that one? They gave you the point. And that's the one that is the
X1.
x, the x coordinate. So that's the vertical line. Horizontal line, you would instead do
Y.
y equal
And you would pick negative 1.3.
negative 1.3. Starting on 19, the directions say to write an equation. So writing an equation, we're going to work through the point slope form. So anything that says write an equation, am I still on camera here?
Yep, you're good.
Does the shield
A little
hinder
bit,
you, or is
but
that okay?
now we're good.
Anything they say write an equation, you should be able to work through point slope form, which is going to be y minus, fill something in. The slope, you're going to need to fill something in. And then this slot, you're going to need to fill something in. So on 20, they say it passes through a point 2, negative 3, with a slope of a half. So is this the 2, or the 3, or the half?
It is the 3.
It has something to do with the 3.
Negative.
What's going to happen here, though?
It's going to be
It's going to
minus
become an
plus.
F. It's a minus because the formula said so. Another minus because the book had one on negative 3. That's going to be a plus 3. So is this the
Half.
half? And this must be
2.
the 2. And then I would check the back of the book and see if they're happy with that as a final answer. And I'm guessing the answer would not be. We can't check that one in the back right now, but I'm going to assume they're going to want to make these be y equals. We've spent most of our algebra career getting y alone. So I'm gonna think extremely likely they'll want you to distribute the half. Half of 2 is 1. To get the y completely alone, to get this out of there, you've got to subtract the 3. And if you subtract 3, the grand total is a -4. The rest of the questions in that section are going to be like a variation on that, kind of a theme. 22 is worse because they give you
No slope.
2 points, but they didn't tell you
The slope.
the slope. However, you can take 2 points,
And subtract them.
do all the subtracting to figure out
The slope.
the
by
slope,
itself.
and then it becomes like 20. For something like 24, they say, here's the slope and the intercept. If they tell you, here's the slope and the intercept, then take a side trip to this. That's why it's named what it's named. If they're telling you the slope and the intercept, could you still use that other equation?
Sure.
You could, but since it's called slope intercept, I would do it by writing the slope next to the x and writing the intercept on there. 26, they tell you there's no slope. So what do you know about no slope?
It is, oh, it's, y.
No slope?
It's x.
Yeah, no slope is vertical. No slope is x equals some number. And then what x number did they give you in 26?
And 26, they gave us 1
So it'd be x equals 1/3.
point.
If we wanted to do 28, 28, they say we have a y-intercept of -6. How can I rewrite that to be as an ordered pair? What's that mean, y-intercept -6?
The second one.
Second one, so 0, -6.
And
They say x-intercept 2,
so 2, 0.
0. Anytime you have 2 points, you can figure out
A slope.
a slope. And once you have a slope,
Then you can plug it in.
then we could go plug those numbers into here. A quick aside, if they give you 2 different choices of points, you just need to
Pick one.
pick one. Doesn't matter which one, just pick one. But we'd have to figure out the slope on 28. 30, they say it goes through a certain point, and it's parallel to this other line.
Oh,
What does parallel mean?
same slope.
Same slope. But to judge slope, the only way you can judge what a slope
Is the number with
is
the
to get the
x.
y alone, and that's the number with the x. So let me do 30 all the way through. Where's the best visual I have for this? Like right about here, best? More this way?
More that way, honestly, because the screen is sort of
Like back here?
like back there.
Is this good?
Yes.
So if I go to do 30, they say write an equation. So I'm going to have to do that. They say for 30, it's going through this -√2. So where should out of A, B, and C, where should the -√2 factor in?
C.
C, because that's, just erase the formula that I needed. So if we're following this formula, this is an x they're giving us a -√2. So this should be minus -√2. They tell us to use a 2. Where should the 2 go?
That should be with the y.
With the y. And then they do a thing that's indirectly giving us the slope. They say go parallel They want us to be parallel to this. How would I begin to get the y alone?
You subtract the root 2x.
I would subtract the root 2x thing.
And then divide the whole thing
I would divide
by 5.
by 5. And then how do I know what the slope is?
It's the one with x.
It's the one with the x. So I just need to take this number, and if I'm parallel, that means the slope
Are they same?
are the same. So this number just goes there. And if I wanted to make that better, if they made me, if I looked in the back of the book and this was right, I'd keep it. Okay, but if I looked in the back of the book and the y was alone again, I would have to first distribute, and then I'd have to
Get the y
get the y alone by
adding.
adding 2. If that's what I had to do, that's what I would do. Then the last little variation on 32, they again give you a point, but they want you instead to be perpendicular to a certain line. How does the word perpendicular change our idea? Negative reciprocal. So if I wanted to redo this, but as a perpendicular problem, everything's the same except this, instead of negative, would have to be positive, and it would also have to be flipped. I talked through the evens, but you're doing the odds.
Okay.
Okay, so like you got some even advice, but the odds is what you're actually gonna do. You just try to use that advice to like play the odds out. So we're 1 to 31 on, and that's it.